I'm live. I'm also reading out of this book entitled Winged Pharaoh. It is written by Joan Grants and it was published in 1937. It was her first book of her far memories. She was a writer of books of far memories, and Winged Pharaoh was her first book, and it was highly acclaimed at the time because it was so accurate and it was so full of detail that many said that it was highly possible that it is a true recount of her far memory. This is about the first dynasty of Egypt, who once knew the code of ethics, but lost it and found it, and 11 dynasties were to pass before it was recovered, but those were more leisurely times when the most lethal weapon was an arrow, a javelin, and a club. We feel that in the present troubled days of this planet, these books must be presented. Right, so this is an old copy, as you can see. I've read it before, but I think it is really good to read now, and I'm looking forward to it. She's a girl here, a young girl, Sekarat. Again, I have to look up her name. I don't know why this happens, but I keep forgetting her name. Sekatara. She has a brother called Nea, and this chapter 6 is about Zep, the lion boy. I have called my lion cub Nutty, and until he was a year old, he was allowed to sleep in my room on a mattress at the foot of my bed. Then my father decided he must be kept with the other tame lions, where they lived in the court next to the hunting dogs. But I was sure I could persuade him to let him stay with me. I had been down by the marsh with Nea very early that morning. He had woken me to tell me that I could go swan shooting with him. We kept past Ma'ata's window in case she should hear us, and beyond the garden we found 3 boys who were friends of Nea's, waiting for us. They had bow cases slung over our shoulders. We had bow cases slung over our shoulders and little arrows for wild fowl in bank quivers. It was still dark, with a faint line of light on the horizon. When we got to the marsh, we crawled through the reeds until we came to the lake. Then we lay on the damp earth at the edge of the shallow water, waiting for the birds to return from feeding. It was getting light when we heard the curious creaking noise that wild swans make with their wings. It was a flight of about 30, shaped like an arrowhead. As they flew over us, we loosened our arrows at them. One dropped a tuft of feathers, but flew on unharmed. Then we heard voices, and we knew it was the fowlers coming to search their snares, so we crept away very quickly. We didn't want to be seen because we had promised not to go out without telling our attendants. When I got back, I found that Nutty was not in my room, so I went to the lion court to see if he was there. No one was about. I unbolted the door of the courtyard and saw Nutty asleep in the sun, with a young lioness of about the same age as himself. I called him, and he swung across the court to me. One of the lion boys heard me. He came running up and said that Nutty was to stay in the court, for he had been given orders that I was not to take him out unless I had somebody with me. I took Nutty by the collar and started to lead him away, but the boy stood in the gateway and would not let me pass. I ordered him out of my way, but he would not move. I saw a heavy whip of plaited hide lying on a bench by the wall, and I picked it up and lashed the boy again and again across the face and shoulders. He didn't cry out, he just stood there, looking at me. I was so angry that nothing existed for me but the boy standing in front of me, and the wheels the whip was cutting across his face and shoulders. Then Nutty sprang forward and knocked the boy down. Nutty wasn't angry, but he was growling, and there was blood all over the boy's arm where Nutty had mouthed him roughly. But the boy was frightened and lay on the ground, so I called to Nutty, and he followed me. Then I took him by the collar and led him to my room. Nutty was very glad to be back with me. I shut him in my room while I went to bathe, and when I got back he had chewed another hole in my mattress and pulled some of the feathers out. He had gnawed the leg of my bed, which was a pity because it was a very nice bed, and the legs of it were like antelope's legs with little gilt hooves. I loved Nutty very much, but I scolded him sternly. He didn't mind at all, and licked my arm affectionately with his rough tongue. someone came to the door, which I had bolted, and said that my father wished to see me at once in the room where he set his seal. He was looking at the papyrus roll when I went in. He had just come from giving audience and still wore ceremonial dress, and the flail was on the table by his hand. When he saw me, he did not smile. He looked like a statue, as if he was sitting in judgment. He said, "A whip in the hand of one of the royal house is a symbol of justice. In your hand it was an instrument of injustice and of cowardice, for you struck one who was but showing his loyalty to Pharaoh and obeying the orders of your father. Moreover, you have injured a boy who, because of his rank and yours, could not strike back. To strike such a one is the action of an arrogant coward and is unworthy of our tradition. If you were a man, or in fact if you were not a young girl child, I should order you to be whipped. Then, had you done this willfully, you would gain a just reward, and had you done it through ignorance, you would gain an experience that would remind you that he who raises a lash unjustly shall have wheels upon his own back. As you are but a child, I hope that the flail of my anger will be sufficient to teach you this law." It was the first time I had realized what I had done, and I thought how brave the boy had been, and how he had never moved all the time I was hitting him. So I wished I wasn't a girl, and that I could be beaten instead of seeing my father so cold and stern and far away. I tried to make myself angry so that I shouldn't cry. I'm not a coward. I show him I'm not. And I put my wrist in my mouth and bit it until the blood ran through my teeth. It was very difficult to do because it hurt a lot. Then I held out my wrist with the blood on it and said, "That's quite as much as Nati bit the boy, and I'll go and tell him he can hit me back without remembering who I am, or that I'm a girl. I'm not a coward." Then I turned and ran out of the room. When I got back to my room, Nati was gone. I bolted the door and lay face downwards on my bed, and I cried and I cried and I cried, and my mouth got full of feathers. Then I heard a tapping at the door, and I thought it was Nea pretending to be father. Nea was the only person I didn't mind crying in front of, because he had said it was only like having a stomach ache and nothing to be ashamed of. So I unbolted the door. But it was not Nea, it was my father. He had taken off his headdress and his beard, and he was still smiling. He took me in his arms and sat down on the bed with me on his lap. He never said anything about all the feathers or about my bed being so rickety with its chewed leg. I was so relieved that he didn't hate me that I couldn't help crying 3 tears on his bare shoulders, and when I licked them off again, they tasted very salty. Then he told me he had a much better idea about how to make the scales true again between me and the lion boy. He said that although they could be adjusted by the lion boy hitting me, a much better adjustment would be made by my trying to undo the hurt of the whip. And he said that I had a special ointment that would take the pain out of the wheels, and that he also would heal them. So I blew my nose very hard and washed my face in cold water, and then we went down to the court of the attendants. The boy, who was called Zeb, was lying on a bench. First I told him that I knew I had been wrong, and I asked him to forgive me. And Zeb said it didn't matter at all and the wheels didn't hurt. I said, "Zeb, I'm very, very sorry," and he went down on one knee and took my hands. He held the backs of them against his eyes and said, "I will serve you truly with all my heart until I die." And my father told him that henceforth he should be one of my own attendants. Then my father showed me how to put the ointment on his wheels, and for 5 days I tended Zeb until the wheels had quite gone. I explained to my father that I had lashed Zeb unthinkingly, because I was so angry that I could think of nothing except that he stood in my way. It was when I was walking with him by the marsh, Shamba, his favorite lioness, who was more clever than any hunting bird, was with us. My father said, "Sekita, your temper should be controlled by your will, as Shamba is controlled by mine. Trained anger, like a trained lion, is a faithful protector and a powerful weapon. With controlled anger, a man can smite a wrongdoer as though he lashed him with a flail. And the fear of such anger is a protection for the weak against those who might hurt them if they did not fear it, just as no one would dare attack a month-old child if it were under Shamba's protection. But he whose temper is unmastered is like a child that is chained to a maddened he-goat. He must follow where it leads, through village middens and through swamps, and even into a cage of wild leopards that would tear them both to pieces. And so, Sakita, remember, anger beneath your will is a flail in your hand, but uncontrolled anger is a lash upon your shoulders. And this was the end of this chapter entitled Zep the Lion Boy. Have a lovely Friday.